Hi, everybody. Welcome to this panel discussion on how to communicate your association's value to your members to support your member retention and acquisition efforts. As Michael mentioned, I'm Tony Lyons. I'm President and Chief Strategy Officer here at Alphabet in Ottawa. We're an integrated brand consultancy helping associations, nonprofit organizations, and destination marketing organizations develop, implement, and integrate their brand story and attributes throughout all facets of their customers' journey. I'm joined today by three industry experts to share their views and experiences on this vitally important topic of understanding, creating, and communicating member value. We don't have a ton of time today, so I'm going to need to skip along quite quickly. On the panel today, we have Aaron Benjamin, who is President and CEO of the Canadian Live Music Association. Welcome, Aaron. We have Carl Wetherell, Executive Director and CEO of the Canada Mining Innovation Council and President of Rethink Mining Ventures. Welcome, Carl. And Giovanna Boniface, who is the Chief Implementation Officer at the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada. Welcome and thanks for joining us today. So let's just start by learning a little bit about yourselves and your organizations and your role in that organization. Let's start with Aaron.
Sure, it's great to be here. I really appreciate the invitation to join you today, and we couldn't have three more different organizations on the panel, so I'm really interested to hear from my colleagues. So I'm the president of the Canadian Live Music Association. We represent the industry side of live music, so not artists, but the infrastructure piece. I'll give some Ottawa examples of whom our members might look like: TD Place, Blues Fest, National Arts Center, Irene's Pub. You get the idea, the whole supply chain that surrounds the ecosystem, everyone responsible somewhere along the way for putting an artist on stage in front of an audience. And we are relatively young. We were founded in 2014 in response to the fact that there was no united voice for live music in the country. And so it's been a very, very interesting last 2.5 years. And hopefully we get into what we've done as an association to help our industry come through.
That's great. Thanks a lot, Aaron. Carl, would you like just to tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization?
Sure, awesome, and thanks for the opportunity to be here today. It's as we say to our Australian colleagues, "G'day" versus "good afternoon" or "good morning," because we always get time confusion here. My name is Carl Wetherell, Executive Director, CEO of the Canada Mining Innovation Council, and our for-profit subsidiary, Rethink Mining Ventures. We're a federally incorporated nonprofit, Canadian-based, although 43% of our members are outside of Canada, which is really cool. And what we're trying to do is transform the mining industry through the co-development of new technologies to solve the really tough challenges they have and lead them towards transformation. And as I mentioned, our members are large companies like a BHP or a Vale, down to smaller companies, oil and gas companies like Syncrude and Suncor. And it's great to be here to talk with other association members about what you're doing and look for the overlaps. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Carl. And Giovanna Boniface.
Hi, everybody. Great to be here. Thanks for the invitation. I'm joining from North Vancouver today, BC, on the traditional unceded territories of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. So I'm with the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada. I'm the Chief Implementation Officer, so I oversee all of our programs and services, ranging from like everything a professional association handles for their members, so education, awards, and even an educational an alternative path to becoming an architect in Canada. So we've been around we're a not-for-profit. We've been around for over actually it's our 115th year anniversary birthday this year, or anniversary, I suppose. And we are focused on and dedicated to representing architects and architecture in the country. And we're the single national voice for architecture, and we're a voluntary organization. And our members range from individual solo practitioners all the way to those practicing in large firms. And we also have lots of support from our corporate partners.
Thank you, Giovanna. So obviously, as you heard from David Coletto earlier on, and you're continually hearing, we're just coming out of the most pivotal and turbulent time, I think, of any of our lives, professional and personal. And the joyride seems to continue at the gift that keeps on giving. So now that we've embraced this new idea of instability being the new normal, how has this turbulence affected the way that you're communicating your value to your members? And I have to start with Aaron. I mean, the clue's in the name there, you know, the Canadian Live Music Association. I can only imagine what's going on over there.
Well, you know, it's funny. I mean, honestly, like being one of the hardest hit sectors, I mean, we are so far from done here. It is still everything still feels urgent. I mean, the foot's off the gas a little bit, but the crisis continues for so many of our members. And one of the things we did in the very beginning to facilitate the sharing of information was like this vacuum, right? There was who had the information, who had the right information, who did people turn to? As I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons this organization was founded was to really work together to try to create a united voice. I represent an industry that doesn't necessarily, it's very competitive, entrepreneurial, proprietary businesses, small, medium, and very, 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 very large. We go from the tiniest to the biggest. They didn't always play particularly well in the same sandbox. And the intention was at the beginning was to identify common ground, like where did our goals overlap and how could we bring all sizes of companies and organizations around the same table to establish sort of our founding principles. And our mission is to entrench the economic, social, and cultural value and power of live music for both public and private sector. And there was a lot of common ground, but enter the pandemic, and instead of sort of just curating for our members and trying to have member oriented, whether it was content or curriculum or networking, it was very clear, because we were still in growth mode. We were still no matter, I mean, we're still a startup. We were 2.5 years ago, very small. We're still only 3 staff, which is hard to imagine. But we opened up our communications to everybody. So we have a Google group listserv, which has become the biggest power tool I could ever have at my disposal. We began to add people to the list. Do you want to know more? Do you want to be part of the conversation? What do you know that we can learn from? And before you knew it, this listserv grew. I don't know, 800-900 leadership from the industry, whether they were members or not. So I guess to just tie that up with a bow, we started giving everything away for free. But as a result, we had so many of the right people around the table, and information, as it moved, people talked to each other in their own networks, and everyone came closer to the CLMA table. And as a result, when it came time to really advocate to government for our survival, which we did very effectively through a very powerful campaign that continues to run to this day, we had the entire industry at our fingertips. And you could not have told me pre-pandemic that was going to be the strategy. Just give it away for free. And now we're in a very strange situation of trying to figure out how to start monetizing all of that access. But that really helped. And I tell you, one of our goals was to be our founding goals was to be the voice of the industry. And overnight we became that as a result of that strategy. It's kind of that simple.
That's great. Thanks, Aaron. So wildly different organizations and associations with different needs and value offerings to government. So Aaron mentioned advocacy right there. Giovanna, does advocacy play into your the value that you communicate to members, or how has it changed with this turbulent times that we're in?
Oh, absolutely. I'd say advocacy is one of our core, well, like other professional associations, and we saw that in the survey results we saw that David presented earlier. It's really one of our core functions for core activities. And at the start of the pandemic, or when things were changing, like our members also were very hard hit. The whole architecture, engineering, construction industry, everything halted. People were very concerned. Obviously, like all others around the globe, it wasn't just our sector, but we took it, we were already had a bit of a setup. We were transitioning already to the virtual world. So we were, it was a fairly smooth opportunity for us to, or a way for us to engage. And so we were quickly sort of mobilize this, our action to take a leadership role as a national organization and organize, well, what would the advocacy look like at this time, switching from what we were doing before to focusing on pandemic specific issues. And so we we started hosting to figure out what that was, because we're not going to guess those things. We started hosting a variety. We took a variety of approaches and tactics to really understand the experience that members were having, whether they're from a firm of 1, 10, or over 100. And we did that using regular focus group, like regular, not even focus groups, not the right word. So we were just hosting these meetings over lunch at different time points, and very regularly and frequently with our president and with our top, like with senior staff, so you could hear firsthand what those needs were, and then we could tailor our approaches. So we so we were tailoring that with and targeting our advocacy to various ministries, but then we also partnered with other organizations and rallied together to be able to do things like expand some of the wage subsidies, the employment supports that were needed. So whether or not that was us on our own, but certainly that realized those outcomes, but we saw that collective action, not only within our membership and in our community, but then partnering with other professional associations, because they were all facing similar issues, was really important. And then communicating that very regularly. So we started a temporary communication channel that was completely focused on pandemic supports, which we heard was fed directly by those conversations, what we were hearing. And hopefully, I think we solved problems. We were there to figure out what those problems were, help solve them, and find solutions, or at least find those pathways. So advocacy was, I would say, it has always been important, but really that was the number one activity in those early days for the pandemic. It continues to be, but different things now.
Great, thanks, Giovanna. Slightly different question to Carl. Your organization is a different structure to Giovanna and Aaron. So how is it, like, this idea of uncertainty? And I know we discussed before this panel that it's actually been kind of a good thing for you, because your industry has sort of used you as a lightning rod for innovation and collaboration. So what stories do you have to tell about this turbulence and uncertainty, and as it relates to member retention and attraction?
Do we have an hour and a half?
No.
but
No,
first off, I think a really key thing, Aaron, your comments about from the smallest to the largest, our interpretation of that is open innovation. How do you give it away, but how do you share it? How do you monetize it? We're talking and doing the same things in different industries. Like the overlaps are very similar. So in terms of how has the crisis affected us, there's a couple of things. The pandemic crisis didn't really hurt us that much. It really helped us. So on that side of things, in the mining industry, executives travel. They put 1 million miles a year traveling to mine sites, because they have sites around the world. That got cut to 0, and then they've realized we can cut it in half. So their availability it doubled for us, and their problems escalated as well. So they had more time. We can actually sit down and talk to the senior people in the industry, and they were coming back to us, and they were pushing us. We were getting pushed a lot by them versus trying to beg them what to do. Excuse me. The other side of the coin too, as the world is going towards more, being green and battery electric and net zero carbon and everything else, the pressure on the industry. There's a crisis on the industry right now in terms of how do we meet our net zero carbon, our ESG, our community relations. How do we get to technology deployed in 3 years, but it's going to take 10. So basically what we did was said, this is how we operate. This is how we can address it. And here are the projects we can put in place to help you out. And by the way, here's 9 other companies doing the same thing. So we can do it better, faster, cheaper, de-risk it, and move it really quickly. So there's a couple of things we did right away. And a really important thing too, related to this, we're Canadian, right? We sit here in Canada. And our name, Canada Mining Innovation Council, is not very conducive to doing anything outside of Canada. So we had a number of companies saying, "You're in Canada, we can't work with you, council or your government," right? So we got this. So we rebranded ourselves online to Rethink Mining, Global Innovation, powered by CMIC. And our international membership grew by 33% in a year. Like, it just took right off because they didn't know where we were. And we've also put boots on the ground. We have project managers. We have two project managers in Australia and 1 in Europe. So we took advantage of this, and our operating model as well. Aaron, same thing. We've got 2 staff. We got 2, but we have 7 spread around the world. Well, 9 if you include the project managers. We rely on our members to provide the value and do some of the work for us instead of paying for it and outsourcing as much as we outsource almost everything, simply because why hire it if you don't have to, right? We are growing, we are bringing more people on board, but there's a lot you can do if you rely on your members to do some of the work for it. So there's a couple of things right off the top.
That's great. Congratulations. I'm sure it's a good news story. Unfortunately, I don't think it's a story that's shared by a lot of member associations. So to that end, I mean, there's a lot of data available. What do we think that your members value the most from a personal experience point of view? Like ideas of access to education or professional development tools, advocacy, conferences, networking, those types of things. So Giovanna, like in your experience, what have your members told you that they value the most?
So all of the above that you just listed, consistently our surveys will rank, the continuing education that they need to maintain their licensure and to, continue to do their good work. The awards program on recognition for projects is a really important part of architecture and in our industry. And so that's important. I'll say though, so there's a lot of products and services and they all sort of rank and they're always sort of the top 3 are kind of always around the same, including advocacy, networking as well. So that peer-to-peer opportunities, especially for smaller firms that maybe don't have that access. So if you're working in a firm that's got 100 plus, and it's interprofessional with different disciplines, they have that access there, those networks. So we being able to help create those communities. But I think the thing that's sort of rising to the top that's also really interesting that we learned, it shouldn't be surprising, but we went through a strategic plan review and took significant time to review our mission and vision and what matters is that what we say and what we do are really aligned with their work, with what matters to them, and not just in those products and services, but in issues around social justice and topics that matter. So for us, those 3 topics that are at the top of the heap are climate action, equity and justice, and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples in Canada. So that, I think we hear more and more how us putting those issues, that lens across all of our work has, like, we see and hear that has been like people are very happy with that, and our actions are aligned with that. So even when we're planning our products, like education, for example, we look at through all those lenses, how those things might be approached. So from putting on an event, thinking around how can we be as low carbon as possible, but also how are we engaging with communities on social justice issues? So where we are for an event, we're not going, being in a city and taking up a bunch of resources, but thinking about how we're really connected to that community and that community actually being part of our event. And then the same as it relates with reconciliation and with Indigenous peoples, really engaging meaningfully with those communities. So I think that part's really new for us. And we've really heard that the strong appreciation and alignment with their values.
That's great. And you're really living your brand values, because I see them in your strategic plan and how you operate on a day-to-day basis. So that's right up my alley as a brand guy. Erin, in terms of things that you've noticed or you've observed or heard from your members, from what they value from your services or their membership in your organization, what are the top 3 things that you think you can tell us about that?
Well, number 1 is advocacy, but this is a community for the most part. Again, just remembering that we didn't exist. We existed before the pandemic, but we were in building mode and our membership increased greatly during the pandemic, even though a lot of them did not pay, which is another problem. But we gave it all away for free because we needed to demonstrate to government our size and scope, and it really helped us have impact. And we knew it would resolve, and it is resolving slowly over time as we get our industry back on its feet. But this was for the large part, especially the smaller companies, they had no relationship with advocacy. They had no prior relationship with government. We're talking about for-profit small businesses for the most part. They didn't know how to fill out a grant application. They never wanted to, they never had to, they never needed to, they never thought they would. And so we had to teach folks about what grassroots advocacy was and why it mattered. And we did that slowly with a very clever campaign. The bunch of them, actually, I mean, we're a small team, but we had a bunch of volunteers helping us and giving us highly skilled experts who joined us to build and develop and deliver this campaign. And so the advocacy pieces, they understand it now. They saw that we had 70 in our world. This is a big number, 70 million in sector specific support in the 2021 budget for live music, and that was historic. And so the wins and the successes on the advocacy piece really taught them why it matters. And my issue with associations, by concern, having run 3 over the last 25 years, is that advocacy is intrinsic. It is very hard to get people to pay for advocacy. So I don't know if we're going to have time to go there today, but it's really something. When I talk to folks, I remind them about those wins. This is what I'm doing right now. We did this, we did that. You would not very likely be around today without the advocacy piece. You need to put your $250 into the pot, get some skin in the game, and be part of the community to have that as building this momentum. And we really shifted our tone a bit. Instead of saying, hey, please join us, it's like, if you're not at the table, you are missing a massive opportunity for your company and your bottom line. And that has really served us well. So there's so much I could say here. You asked for 3, but maybe I should just hold it there so we can get going.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. We've about 5 minutes left, so I appreciate it. Thank you, Aaron. One question that I think might be valuable to the audience would be, do any of you have an aha moment that happened over the last 2 years, or even in the last, even pre-pandemic or post-pandemic, if that's even a thing? That the one thing that you think has either revolutionized or made a huge difference. And Carl, I know your list is long here, but I'm going to start with you, because you did send me quite a long list of aha moments. But what would be the top 2?
Yeah, okay. I think there is only 2, but just to Erin's point, just to emphasize the point she made, we did do advocacy a number of years ago, and then we stopped, and our members turned around and said, you haven't done anything for a year because you spent 2 years advocating for $100 million. What have you been doing? We're leaving. It's like, come on, really? So the one aha moment was, leave the advocacy to our sister organization and don't do it anymore. So that's a direct connection again, Aaron, to what you talked about. So we had a couple. One, we're a nonprofit corporation looking at technology development, and even though we had commercialization embedded into our objects of incorporation, commercialization, ownership of IP and assets, and all this sort of stuff for a for-profit purpose, we can't do that. Like, we can't do that. We'll get us in trouble, right? We'll lose our nonprofit status. And the second piece related to that is there is absolutely no capital for a nonprofit to do this stuff. So we created a for-profit subsidiary, Rethink Mining Ventures. We're in the process of building a venture fund and hopefully signing our first deal for commercialization for startup is going as well. So that, it wasn't really an aha moment. It's like, my God, we got to do something. We got to do it fast, like a pivot. That was probably the major one. And the other one I mentioned before is, what's the business model around? We've expanded internationally very quickly in multiple countries. We're onboarding people in Saudi Arabia, Japan, and Chile. But you need boots in the ground. We're a nonprofit association. We don't have money to hire 3 or 4 people. How do we do that? So we basically look at a different business model for how we get project managers on the ground, either funded by our member companies, funded by projects, because we have 17 projects going, a different operating model to make sure we have that connectivity on the ground and boots in the ground. A really good example of how that works. We were talking to one of our project managers in Australia last night, and the 8 companies around the table in one project are calling him every day. So having that boots on the ground is critical, and it's funded not from our membership, it's funded from our project. So we do it a little bit differently, and he's provided by a mining company, one of our members. So there's a different way of doing this. Mm-hmm. Those are the two key things.
That's great. Thanks, Carl. Phrase the question slightly differently for Giovanna. So what's the one thing you would tell a CEO, president, executive director of an association to do to improve their members' value?
I think you realize, you accept that you can't be everything to all people in the group. Identify that figure out what those pain points are for the people that you're serving, identify that solution, and then stick to, being really laser focused on those things that you can be the best in that industry for. So you're not like repeating what, a bunch of others. So, and that's pretty hard to accept because you want to do everything in an association. So that would be my piece of advice over my 25 years in nonprofits.
Excellent. Thank you. Similarly, Erin, the one piece of advice, or call it an aha moment?
Well, to quickly, the aha moment was collaborating with the unusual suspects is key to the future of everything. I spent more time working with the airlines and the hotels and the tourism sector than live music or the music industry. Barely talked to the music industry, recorded, etc. So the unusual suspects and something like the Hardest Hit Coalition that David Coletto mentioned earlier came about from those kinds of relationships, and that collaboration has kept many of us, no doubt, on this call alive. And then the other piece in terms of empowering your leadership, data, key messages, and information. We love to give our members distilled, especially during our campaign to try and leverage additional emergency support. We figured out where we were at. Research is key, and then empowering your people with really simple to use information and deploying them on the ground in their own regions to amplify and elevate your message at every level of government. And it sounds kind of overwhelming, but when you unpack, it's actually pretty simple. And that is something that we learned in our industry how to do very well. And we will continue to do it, crisis or no crisis.
That's excellent. Okay, I think that's all our time. It looks like we're getting the hook from the producers. So thanks a lot for the panel. And I guess we're heading back to Michael.